Okay. Okay, we're live on Facebook. Good evening, everybody, to our second class in the course of Days Are Coming. Wonderful class. Hopefully everybody got their books, those who ordered them last week. And as I say, you can still order them and we'll get it out to you. So you'll have it by the next class because you are going to enjoy the class and much more if you have the book. And you will also be able to have this book for future references. I'm going to start off the class with a small clip, a small video from that will encapsulate the last week's class that was made by JLI. And then we'll start this week's class after this short video that I hope is going to work, and you will see it. Okay, good evening, everybody. We are going to start. So that was basically the class that we just went from, the first class, where it talks about that the world be itoy ubachishana, that the what the sages spoke about in the time and it's earlier time, it's rush time. And the Rebbe said that we are in a time we can have both, basically both concepts to be accomplished in this time that we live in. And that's why this is the best time for you have to just open your eyes. That was the expression that you saw in that video. You have to open your eyes. And if you would open your eyes, you would realize that the time is now and the world is ready. And if the world is ready, we can rush it a little. We can rush the process and make it in a miraculous way. This class continues in student page number 17. The class continues because before we continue the rest of the class, we need to get around the, so to say, the elephant in the room, that those who know that the statements of the prophets, which is Gog u'Magog. Everybody is frightened about Gog u'Magog. And seemingly, have we passed Gog and Magog? Was Gog and Magog already, or was it not? What is Gog and Magog? Where does it come from? And why are we so afraid of Gog and Magog? And therefore, this class goes into talk about Gog and Magog before we go on to the next classes, which continue in the spirit of the Messianic times. So let us start in Yecheskel, which this is the source of this whole prophecy of Gog and Magog. Let us go to that's in text number 1. This is Yecheskel, Ezekiel. It's in chapter 38 of Ezekiel. And he says the following. The word of God came to me saying, Son of man, set your face towards Gog, toward the land of Magog, the heads of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy concerning prophecy concerning him. And you shall say, so said the Lord God, behold, I am against you, Gog, the head of Meshech and Tubal. So said the Lord God, it will come to pass on that day that words will enter your heart, and you will think a thought of evil. And you will say, I shall ascend upon the land of open cities. I shall come upon the tranquil who dwell in securely, all of them living without a wall, and they have no bars or doors, to take spoil and to plunder, to loot, to return your hand upon the ruins, and to the people gathered from nations, acquiring livestock and possession, dwelling in the navel of the earth. It will come to pass on that day, when Gog comes against the land of Israel, declares the Lord God, that my blazing indignation will flame in my nostrils, and I will judge against him with pestilence, with blood, and rain bringing floods and great hailstones, fire and brimstone will I rain down upon him, and upon his herds, and upon the many people that are with him. And I will reveal myself in my greatness and in my holiness, and I will and will be recognized in the eyes of the many nations, and they will know that I am the Lord. Here is the prophecy of Yecheskel, which talks about that in essence, it talks about that there's going to come a time that the nations of the world are going to go against the land of Eretz Yisrael. They're going to go against the land of Israel. But as the prophecy says, God will fight against these nations. And it'll bring about the Messianic times. That's the end of the prophecy. That it'll bring about the Messianic times. On this statement of Yecheskel, which is not clear exactly what Yecheskel meant. Who is Gog? Who is Magog? Who are these people? Where do they come from? What are they? Very unclear, and therefore there's so many midrashim on this Yecheskel. The truth is, this concept of Gog and Magog, the end of times of Gog and Magog, it doesn't start in Yecheskel. You find it also in the commentaries of Chumash itself. If you look in the book of Genesis, in chapter 49, verse number 1, over there, Jacob calls in his children. Vayikra Yaakov Banav. It says, as Jacob comes to the end of his life, he calls in his children, and he tells them, come and gather, my children. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen at the end of days. And on this, the Medrash says, he prophesied to them Gog and Magog. He told them what's going to happen with the situation of Gog and Magog. We have a Medrash, that's in Genesis. If you look later in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse number 26, you can look up the story there about these two guys, Eldad and Moidad. Eldad and Moidad, God came upon the people and they started to prophesy. And Yeshua comes to Moses and he says, Eldad and Moidad, these two guys, Misnabim Mamachna, they are prophesying in the tent. They're prophesying to the other Jews. What are they prophesying? There are many commentators on that. What was their prophecy? And there is a medrash on that too. There's commentary on that too. That what were they prophesying? Gog umagog. They were prophesying what would happen at the end of days, and what would happen in the Achas Yom, the end of days, with the story of Gog umagog. These nations that are going to come upon the Jewish nation at the end of days. So we have it. This concept is not only in Yecheskel. We see that we have it in the beginning of Genesis, in the story of Jacob. The truth is that those say that Gog and Magog was Lavan. We say it in the Haggadah. Lavan bikesh la'akir akar. Lavan wanted to destroy everything. He was Gog and Magog. He was the Gog and Magog. As I said, there's many ways to look at it. But the truth is, in the Yecheskel itself, it's not clear when Gog and Magog will be. And even in the period of when Gog and Magog is going to be, there's many arguments. There's many arguments. You can take it at face value that Gog and Magog will happen before the coming of Mashiach. But actually, the Rambam, Maimonides, he holds Gog and Magog is going to happen after the coming of Mashiach. So you have the Rambam himself. There are those who hold that it's not going to happen after the coming of Mashiach. It's going to happen before and continue as into the coming of Mashiach. So you have that interpretation of that's when it's going to happen. And therefore, there are some that say, my friends, we don't know when it's going to happen. Maybe it happened already. We don't know. We don't know when it's going to happen. We'll have to wait and see when it happens. And that's what you have in text number 2 on page 19 in your book. The statement of Rab Meir Liebush Weiser. Rab Meir Liebush Weiser. He says, the designated day is hidden and closed. For God did not reveal it to the prophet, any prophet, not even to Yecheskel, didn't tell him. Nor has anyone ever uttered it. When is this Gog and Magog? The vision on Yadyan occurred in this world. Only when the events happen and the spoken day will arrive, the matter will be clear. So therefore, what do we know? What do we have an understanding of this whole concept of Gog and Magog when it's basically we'll have to, maybe when Mashiach comes, we were told that it happened. There are those that say it was World War I. There are those that say it was World War II. We can all say whatever we want to say because we, in essence, all don't know exactly. And therefore, we can all project and decide on our own merry way, when is Gog and Magog going to happen? Who is Gog and Magog? Who is this Gog and Magog? Is there a nation called Gog? Actually, if you look in the words of the prophet, it's not Gog and Magog. He says Gog, who is in the country of Magog. Not Gog and Magog. You look at the verse itself. Gog was the Gog, El Gog Eretz HaMagog. Gog was in the country of Magog. But then it says it was in the land of Meshech Tuvel. So some people say that actually the Gog is the king, Magog is the, so to say, the capital of this country. There are those that say Gog umagog. If you take the word Gog umagog and you count up those two words, Gog umagog, they equal up to 70. Gog and Magog are the 70 nations. The 70 nations. That's what the prophet says. The world is going to go against Israel. That has happened already. The world is going to go against Israel. What are they symbolic in? Gog and Magog. 70 nations. And that's in the word Gog and Magog. So it's really Gog and Magog. There's no physical Gog and Magog. It's symbolic of the 70 nations as it's in the gematria of the word Gog and Magog. So therefore, you look in text number 3, the name Rabbi Meir Levush, same rabbi, repeats itself. The name Gog and Magog have already been forgotten. And we no longer have any idea which nation is the one the prophet named Magog, whose king is named Gog, when they will actually come and the prophet words realize. And then we will know that this is the Gog which the prophecy spoke. So when it comes the time, we'll all one day know who this Gog is and which country is Magog. One day we'll figure it out. But right now, everybody can say what they want, but basically, we don't know. We don't know. So irrelevant to that concept, but there's a prophecy that there's going to be a Gog and Magog. He's going to come and he's going to go out to war against the Jews. There's going to be a great fight between the Jewish people and this Gog and Magog. That we know for sure. And ultimately, we're going to survive. We're going to survive. So therefore, the Medrash, if you look in page 20, text number 4, over there, the Medrash of Yalkut Shimoni, he writes, in the future times, the nations will gather up against Israel and wage a war. What will God do? He will go out and battle for them. He'll protect the Jews' heads, as the verse says, I shall protect my head on the day of battle. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman said, this is the day when the two worlds will meet one another, the ultimate battle of Gog and Magog. There's going to come a battle. There's going to be such a thing, a battle between the nations of the world and the Jewish nation, and the Jews will survive. The Jews will survive. The question is, will there be Jewish casualties? Will some Jews also fall in this time? And it's not clear. That either is not clear. There are some who say some Jews will fall, and there are some that say the Jewish people will survive totally. So it's also an unclear situation. Exactly what is going to be. We know that's going to be a war. It's going to be a terrible time. The Jews are going to survive for sure, and the nations will come to their knees, as the verse in the Yechezkel, the original place of this prophecy, is that ultimately the nations of the world are going to come to the realization that God is the king of the world, and that's going to be the outcome. We know for sure the positive outcome ultimately of Gog and Magog. That's for sure. We know the positive outcome of this situation. So that's a beautiful concept. Beautiful concept. Whatever it is, it's a beautiful concept in the prophecies. And as I said, there's so many arguments in the sages themselves, exactly the exact story or the exact situation, what is going to happen. So really the question is, so what is the point? What's the point of the whole thing? If nobody knows exactly, even the prophet doesn't say exactly, what's the point? What do we need to have this whole thing as we talk about Mashiach and the Messianic times and the coming of Mashiach? Why do we need to throw in this Gog and Magog? Why do we need to throw in a Gog and Magog into the whole beautiful picture? Into the whole beautiful picture, we got to throw in this negative thing of Gog and Magog, this negative concept of wars and tragedies, even, and God's going to have to put his wrath upon it. What do we need this whole situation? What's the point of the situation? The truth is, the prophet says it himself. The prophet gives the answer, Yecheskel gives the answer himself. Because Yecheskel says, the whole point is to revelation of God. That's the whole point. The whole point of Egypt, as the Torah says, if you go back to the story of Egypt, the whole point of the plagues and everything God says, it's for one point, to prove that there's a God in the world. Not only to prove there's a God of the Jewish nation, but to prove that the God is the God of the world. That is the whole thing. That's what we have to, that's what has to go through. Not only the Jewish people have to have a yearning for Mashiach and have to understand that the world needs to be have a godliness in the world and needs to be a more godly world. The nations of the world need to learn that too. They also need to go through this concept to ultimately rectify themselves and to be able to elevate the world. Because the Jewish people cannot elevate the world to be a more spiritual world if the world is not going to elevate itself. So therefore, we need to have these two processes. And therefore, the Torah says, Goy Magoi, where the world needs to be changed. And the nations of the world, the big powerhouses in the world, need to get through their heads that, hello, you're not the balabas, you're not the boss of the world. There's a God in the world. That needs to be accomplished through this Goygel Magoi. That's what the whole purpose is. That's really where it starts, and that's really where the whole reasoning is. So therefore, what is the purpose? Why does it need to go through this concept so we can continue really in the spirit of the first class? Because the struggle between Choshech and Or, the struggle between light and darkness, is not a new struggle. This is a struggle from the beginning of time, from the first day of creation. The struggle between light and darkness. And how do we bring about the aspect of more light in a dark situation? How do we bring the aspect of redemption in a gullus, in an exile situation? And that's really the struggle. That's what we're trying to accomplish in the world. To make change in the world, to make a change in this world, the world needs to go through a little bit of pain, so to say. We know Chassidus always says that the example of that is the creation of a tree. You take a seed, you put it into the ground, the seed needs to rot. And once the seed rots, now you have a birth. You have the birth of a beautiful new tree. You have the birth from this little seed, not of something that's bigger and that has hundreds and thousands of seeds. Comes about not through taking a seed and keeping it whole the way it is. If the seed would not rot, then the change would not happen. Sometimes we need that concept within the world to, so to say, go through a little bit of change, a little bit of self-work, a little bit of cleansing, so to say, so that the world can be able to bring about a new reality. And the truth is, if you learn Chassidut, if you come to the Tanya classes, you all will know the statement of Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, who said, I've seen the greatness of light from darkness than light from light. Light from darkness. If you take darkness and you reveal the light in it, you break the darkness and you reveal the light, that is true light. So this is as explained by the Maharal MiPrague. Beautiful, we have two beautiful texts from the Maharal MiPrague, Rabbi Yehuda Lowy, who said, all new creations come after destruction of old reality. Thus, there must be something that causes utter destruction of the current reality prior to Mashiach's revelation. It must be completely removed, and then the new reality settles in. That's the way the Eibishter made the world. That's the way God made the world. There needs to be a creation of a new entity. The truth is, we see that in marriage. You take two single people, there needs to be a new whole reality of your breakage of I. Now we become us, we create a new reality. If we're both going to go with the I as we lived maybe 20 or 30 years, and now we're trying to create two I's come together, it will never be a new reality. You have to break the I. You got to break the ego to be able to make an I us, and then we can have a beautiful new reality. The Gaiva. That's the way that God put it into the system. And therefore, we find that also when it comes to the aspect of the world. To break evil, you need to be able to crush it. And then the evil will sprout a whole new reality, a whole new beginning. Look at the next text in the words of the Maharal MiPrague. In your book, text number 6, page 22. This then is the idea of the war of Gog and Magog. Here the Maharal MiPrague explains to all of us the meaning of this war. That are destined to be with Mashiach. All the nations represented division will band together to battle Mashiach. Who's the king, who is the king and one unified nation of the Jews. This is the real war. The world is going through a cleansing period. A world that wants to be divided now wants to be united. To bring this unity is not easy. There's going to be a lot of clashes. Sad, but you can almost say today, to bring unity in this country, this is very tough. This is not easy. We all want unity. United States of America. But there's such division. There's such a Yitzhahara for division. There's such an evil inclination for division. How do we bring about unity when there is division? And that's the struggle. That's the Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog is 70 nations. Bring it, and the Eibishter says, really, there's one world. It's one human race that has many aspects to it. The Jewish nation, 70 nations, but really they're one. It's all one. They have one God. They have one purpose in this world, to make this world a better world. How do you take from such division and bring it, crush it into one? That takes a lot of effort and sometimes a lot of clashes. Thus, the battle of Gog and Magog is really against God, for He is the one and He is the one that unites Israel. In the Messianic era, when God and His name will be completely one, the forces of evil will rise up and oppose God's rule. He says, no, we don't want one. We don't want oneness. We want separation. The forces of Mashiach's kingdom is, by definition, unstoppable. And so He will rule over all nations. For Mashiach will overpower them and remove the powers of evil and eradicate the Yitzhahara, the evil inclination. It emerges from all the above that the war of Gog and Magog is to remedy the deficiency of this world. And then the Yitzhahara removed as well. When the world will go through its own inner battle, then evil will be eradicated from the world, and the world will become one entity. And that's the way the Maharal MiPrague looks at the whole prophecy of Gog and Magog. What is the meaning of this prophecy of Gog and Magog? My friends, the Alter Rebbe, in the next statement of the Alter Rebbe, The Alter Rebbe brings it more to home. He brings it more to the concept of our personal struggles. Now look at with the Alter Rebbe, the text of the Alter Rebbe, in text number 7, page 26, 25 of your book. The Alter Rebbe says the following statement. Why is the current exile so long? The Alter Rebbe asks a question. Why is the current exile we are in? It's over 2,000 years. Mitzrayim was 210 years. Destruction of the first temple was 70 years. We're now in over 2,000 years in exile. This is like taking very long. So listen how the Alter Rebbe answers this question. Very good question. So he says, during the time of the first temple, when the prophets would rebuke the Jews, they would not deny their wrongdoings. Their perjury was out in the open. And they would say outright that they wished to serve idols. That was a struggle by the Jews, even in the first temple. Till great leaders of the Jewish nation, great kings, put actually idols in the temple. Can you imagine that Jewish leaders today would put an idol in the temple? It wouldn't happen. But you could, in the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, they put idols in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash, Menashe, Avot, whatever. And Jews struggled. It was a great struggle for the Jews, idol worship. And at that time, evil forces were very strong. Up until the point that when the men of the Great Assembly eradicated it, so the men of the Great Assembly, the Gemara, the Talmud says that the Anshe Knesset Gdolah, the rabbis of the Great Assembly, got together. They realized this power of Avodah Zarah, of idol worship, is just too powerful. So they got together and they prayed to God to eradicate Avodah Zarah, idol worship of the Jewish nation. And you know what? They accomplished it. They took away idol worship from the Jewish nation. That's why we know not too many Jews. I don't know any Jews that are bowing to cows anymore. It's not doing that anymore. But at the time, I mean, even today, they're finding artifacts of little cows of idols from the first Beis Hamikdash. The times of the first, the Jews had these little idols. They couldn't give up these idols, these little cows, and they would bow down to these little gold cows. It's hard for us to understand it. The Gemara even writes, some of these, that some of these like Menashe, who was a king, came down to a Tana. He said, you can't imagine the taiva we had to bow down to these things. It was such a desire that we couldn't control it. So the rabbis of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset Gdolah, which is the Sanhedrin, got together and they took it out. Thus, it was easier for them to repent, for it isn't much to wait for. Either this one wins or the other. So in essence, once they took away the taiva, the real rooted desire for the Jews, so it was easy for the Jews to get rid of Avodah Zarah. And we got rid of Avodah Zarah from our midst. That was so. The time, the Alter Rebbe says, at the time of the temple, that there was such light. There was also very strong opposite of light. And when a Jew sinned, he knew he sinned, and they said, could not control himself. I have to sin, almost. By contrast, the Alter Rebbe says, this current exile is represented by Lavan the Aramean. I mentioned last time, Lavan was a tricker. He was a guy whom Jacob lived 20 years until he was able to subdue him. Jacob took time, lived with Lavan for 20 years, and Lavan Gaiti, with Lavan I sojourned, with Tayag Mitzvah Shamarti, but the 613 commandments I kept. Lavan was called a sneaker, a ramai, tricker, guy who fooled people. So as long a time before Laban was a trickster and a swindler, in other words, the Jew would know that that with one sin, he exercised himself from the Jewish people of God. You would know that one sin sunder him a little bit from God. One little sin. We talk ourselves in. We're like Lavan, who talks ourselves in. Don't worry. God can handle this sin. It's not so important. Even though the Torah says don't do it, but we talk ourselves in that it's all right. So we talk ourselves in. We're like Lavan. We talk ourselves into things that are not true. He would never commit a sin. Nobody, Alter Rebbe says, nobody openly says, I know it's a sin, and I'm going to do it anyway. Very few Jews. But he fabricates excuses, convinces himself that the sin has no impact. That's the Yetzer Hara today. The Yetzer Hara today is not, the evil inclination today is not, I'm going to do the sin. The evil inclination today is it's not a sin. It's not so bad. It's wonderful. Good. It's fine. So what happens when you have such a situation? It turns out that the evil is hidden and cunning. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, fools him to the extent that he doesn't even realize it's bad. Thus, it takes a long time to weed this out. When you do not know what is right and wrong, and everything's one big mix-up, now it's much difficult to separate what's right and wrong. What is good and what's evil? It's very difficult. You almost get fooled, God forbid, and think what is right is wrong and what is wrong is right. And when you're in that situation, the Alter Rebbe says, it's very hard to rectify it, very hard to change it. How does one change something he doesn't think it needs to be changed? How does one change something evil when he doesn't think it's so evil to begin with? And so Jacob had to live with Lavan for a long time. However, later when Esau will regreet him in a future shadow down with Gog and Magog, when the Yetzer Hara will stand in open defiance, it will be speedily eradicated. So that's the prophecy the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says one day it's going to come a time evil is going to rear its head. When evil rears its head, we'll be able to change it. Right now, it's very difficult. What is evil and what's good? What is true, what's false? Is there truth? Is there a false? We live in such a lost time that nobody knows what is right and what's wrong. Nobody knows what is good and what's bad. We can talk ourselves in that bad is good. But when it will be revealed that bad is bad, then you'll be able to knock it down. It'll be easy to knock it down. And that's the way the Alter Rebbe looks at Gog and Magog. That Gog and Magog is going to be a time that evil is going to rear itself, and people will not be able to fool themselves to say that this is good, because everybody will see it's evil. The world will see it's evil. Today, you know what is good, and you know what's the opposite of good, I believe. It's hard to imagine that people fool themselves that BDS is a good thing. It's against Jewish people. It's clear. Clear as day. And therefore it needs to be eradicated. Any person, people try to hide anti-Semitism against Israel. Anti-Semitism against Jews. Oh, we love Jews, but we don't like Israel. What are you trying to fool the world? It's clear. You can see it on YouTube. Everything is clear. When a nation of the world goes out against the Jewish people, everybody knows it. It's not like years ago, somebody can be terrible and nobody knew. The rest of the world didn't know it. Today, anybody who says something evil, bingo, it's across the world. Throughout the entire world, everybody sees it. There's no secrets today. And therefore, it's easy to go against this evil. It's easy, much easier to eradicate this evil. But then the Rebbe goes even further. And he says, the truth is, Gog and Magog is in each and every one of us. Because, my friends, it's interesting that there's 70 nations. Why are there 70 nations? You know, there's more than 70 nations, but in general, they're all combined within the 70 general nations. Shivan, there's seven umas, Shivan umah, there's 70 nations. Gog and Magog is 70 nations. Because 70 are 7 emotions. The 7 emotions, each emotions in Kabbalah and Chassidus, each emotion has 10. So it's 7. Each one is 10 is 70. And that's the struggle. That's my personal struggle with the 70 nations, the 7 emotions, my 7 personal emotions. That's the Gog and Magog that I need to struggle with. And therefore, if you go to the last text of this class, on page 29, text number 9, he says, the Rebbe, this is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe says the battle of Gog and Magog is in a personal sense, represents every individual struggle with the 7 negative impulses. Each of these comprises 10 different strains, represented 70 nations. After all, one must work with every emotion and all its strains, not only with the chesed, but all the strains of chesed. Because chesed has 10 things, 10 components in it: chachma, bina, das, and the 7 emotions. Namely, to transform them and raise them up to the hills of Jerusalem. Namely, the ultimate sense of fearing God. Every Jew is capable of doing so. When indeed every Jew does so, then based on the nations that also, based on the notion, that also the world he put into their hearts, the actions of the individual Jew have a global effect. It generates victory over the 70 nations in the literal battle of Gog and Magog. So the Rebbe says, you want to overcome the literal Gog and Magog, you need to overcome the personal Gog and Magog. You need to change your character. You need to work, each and every one of us needs to work on their 70 nations, on their 7 emotions. We know that the Rebbe writes, Rabbi Shebetz writes, that the month of Elul is the month of reckoning. And he writes there that just like in the month of Elul, just like in a business guy, when he makes a calculation, he goes to an accountant, and the accountant tells him the negative, the positive things of the past years in business and the negative. That means the positive should be enforced and made better, and the negative needs to be changed. So too, the month of Elul is a reckoning of my past year. And the positive things that I have need to be enforced and made better and stronger. And the negatives need to be changed. And that is the rectification and the strengthening of my personal 7 emotion, which is 70, Gog and Magog. This then is the reason where we are told about the battle of Gog and Magog and all the nations with all other details, etc. So that we can be informed as to what we ought to do now. The Rebbe would say, what is important to tell me about Gog and Magog? It's going to happen. Nobody knows when it's going to happen. Nobody knows if it happened. Nobody knows what about it. So why we talk about something that nobody knows what it means? And the Rebbe says we do know what it means. Because we have within us Gog and Magog. We have within us 7 emotions that needs to be worked on. That's the real Gog and Magog. In so much as the future redemption is directly hinged upon our work in exile. We now know that our personal spiritual victories are the pathway to the global literal victory with Mashiach. The Rebbe would always say many times, Maseinu v'avodeseinu b'zman hagolus, that our service and our work in a time of exile, it all depends on our service and our work in the time of exile. The more that our service and our work in the time of exile will be completed in our own life, will bring about the ultimate redemption in the bigger picture of the world. So that's why may he come soon and lead us upright to the promised land. Beautiful statement of the Rebbe. So here we have explained, according to many commentators, ultimately according to the Rebbe, the meaning of Gog and Magog and what the prophecy meant within our time and why we need to have it. Even if you want to say Gog and Magog will be before the coming of Mashiach, we need to change ourselves. We need to change the world. And we need to ultimately make this world. And I believe, as the Rebbe said, we have. And that's why the Rebbe always would say, B'chesed u'berachamim, that even there's going to be, might be Gog and Magog, but it will be done, since the world will be rectified, it will be done with kindness, chesed, berachim, kindness and mercy. And the Rebbe said we saw that a little bit when the downfall of communism. When communism collapsed, it was 70 years of pain and suffering of those people that lived under communism, especially the Jewish people who lived under communism, who were in constant pain and suffering for years and years and years, and the whole thing dropped without a shot. The whole thing fell apart without anybody getting hurt. And that is b'chesed u'berachamim. That is, that we don't need to have even Gog and Magog, that the world will change and people will become better. And they'll need to go through some crushing. They will come better, b'chesed u'berachamim. And so too, you see throughout the world is becoming a better world because people want a better world. And therefore, they don't need to go and fight for a better world, but actually the world and all the negativity in the world is changing to become an unbelievable world. My friends, with this, we are ready for the next part, next class, class number 3, Elijah the prophet. We all, on Pesach, go and greet Elijah the prophet. We all go greet him. We're all excited about Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Tishbi. Eliyahu the prophet, Eliyahu is going to announce and bring about the coming of Mashiach. What is Eliyahu Hanavi? What is the meaning of this whole concept of Elijah? It's a phenomenal class next Tuesday night, 7:30. You don't want to miss the 3rd class. So I always tell you again, if you don't have a book, get that book because you don't want to miss the 3rd class. God bless you. Let's hope that we will only have a good Chodesh this Thursday and Friday is Rosh Chodesh Elul, the month of Elul. We should have a wonderful, beautiful Chodesh Tov, and that in preparation 30 days for Rosh Hashanah. We should have a Ksiva, V'Chsima Tova, and a Shana Tova Mesuka, and a beautiful sweet year.